It's no secret the United States rubs a lot of countries the wrong way. Really though, all countries rub other countries the wrong way every now and again. Maybe not Switzerland, but that's just global politics. Recently, the United States has started to rub some of our longtime friends the wrong way. So today, I thought we'd take a look at the countries that have an axe to grind with good old Uncle Sam, and their axes are getting bigger. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Germany. Germany and the US are like old friends who pretend everything is fine, but secretly hold grudges. Between the NSA spying scandal, disagreements over trade policies, and Washington constantly pushing Europe to spend more on defense, Berlin is getting a little tired of America's antics. It's always been a pretty strange relationship with the United States and Germany. We tried to meddle in their Nord Stream 2 thing, which was this gas pipeline to Russia. The United States didn't want Germany to open this gas line for a few different reasons. They didn't want Russia making a bunch of money because of Ukraine, and they felt Russia would hold it over their heads for political gain in future years. Also, the United States has a whole lot of natural gas, and of course we'd rather them buy it from us than Russia. Another thing they have is Germany prefers diplomatic relationships with China and Russia, while the US pushes for confrontation, it seems like. At least that's how Germans see it. They're also tired of America treating the EU like an afterthought. We'll see how all this works out in the coming years. Number 9, Mexico. Mexico is America's disgruntled neighbor. Trade disputes, border issues, and that whole we're going to build a wall and make you pay for it thing haven't exactly strengthened relationships. Mexicans have long felt that the US politics treats them unfairly, especially when it comes to migration and drug enforcement. Just recently, we threatened to put tariffs on them, but that's on pause right now. That could change tomorrow. The US standpoint has always been do more to help us stop the drugs flowing in and the people flowing into the United States through our shared border. This is another one that's really on a hardcore, let's wait and see how this pans out in the coming months, not years, in the coming months. The war on drugs has been a disaster for Mexico, with the US demand fueling the cartels and Washington blaming Mexico for the violence, and it's a little bit of a rough spot for both countries, I'd say. Despite all that, Mexico remains one of the #1 countries Americans move to when they're leaving the United States. Number 8, Saudi Arabia. Remember when the US and Saudi Arabia were basically besties? Yeah, that's changing. Between Washington's reduced dependence on Saudi oil, its shifting stance on human rights, and the whole unpleasant business about the reporter that got killed, Saudi Arabia is starting to look elsewhere, like China and Russia, for new allies. So what's their problem? The US reduced its dependence on Saudi oil, meaning they've lost a little leverage over us. When we were really dependent on them, they could do whatever they want. We're producing more oil, we're refining more gasoline, and electric vehicles are slowly becoming mainstream. But as proof of them turning away, the Saudis are turning to China and Russia, like I said, even accepting payment in Chinese yuan, which is their currency, instead of the US dollar. This one, I don't think it's as rough as a lot of the other ones, but I do think it has the potential to go bad for both countries. But their biggest problem is we're not using as much Saudi oil, and, they had us hooked for a very long time. I'm sure a lot of dealers across the United States felt the same way when they started legalizing the electric lettuce. Number 7, Denmark. Their relationship status with us is sort of like, I thought we were friends. Denmark is a tiny but proud nation, and while it's been a steadfast US ally, Washington has tested its patience. This ongoing Greenland thing, it started in 2019 when the then President Donald Trump said he was thinking about buying Greenland from Denmark. Obviously, this one's a little weird, but really, it's not the first time the United States has bought property. I mean, that's how we got here. We founded some of it, should say took it over, then we bought some more and still kind of took it over. Then we eventually bought Alaska, which oddly enough, Russia in recent years has been making noise about how they got screwed in that deal and they want it back. Anyway, back to Denmark and Greenland. Now that Trump's back in the White House, he's still talking about getting Greenland. Denmark's Nordic neighbors are increasingly skeptical of US influence, and Copenhagen is catching that vibe. The US also has been pressuring them to increase their military spending, despite the Danes preferring social welfare over war budgets. Now, Denmark isn't totally anti-US, but the whole Buy Greenland fiasco has left a bad taste in their mouth, and Danes are now questioning just how much they should listen to Washington. This part is totally my opinion, but I think this one's just gonna fade away. Give it a few months. But first, let's talk about today's sponsor, Venice AI. By now, you've probably heard of the company DeepSeek. They created AI that rivals ChatGPT at a fraction of the cost, and right now, it's #1 on most app stores. Here's the problem. Every conversation you have on DeepSeek gets stored on Chinese servers and is subject to their censorship or whatever else they want to do. So the good news is if you want to try out DeepSeek without getting Beijing involved in your conversations, the solution is today's sponsor, Venice AI. Venice AI is a generative platform that is private and permissionless. They utilize open source AI models to deliver text, code, and image generation to your browser. There's no downloads, no installation of anything. Since DeepSeek made their model open source, the folks at Venice AI were able to edit and keep it private, removing any bias injection or censorship. But if you're worried about people looking at your conversations on AI, it's not just Beijing. The leading AI platform in the United States has a former director of the NSA on its board right now. We also know these companies program their AI to give certain answers. So I love the fact that Venice AI doesn't censor you or spy on your conversations. So if you want to try it out, take advantage of Venice AI's free trial and try the service out. And if you want to try it out, you don't even have to create an account. You can just use my link. Go to VeniceAI/Briggs, start chatting with AI. So if you want access to a completely private and censorless DeepSeek model and other amazing features, you can use my link venice.ai/Briggs, and you can use that code to get 20% off the Pro plan. Back to the video. Number 6, India. While still working with the US on many fronts, India is increasingly skeptical of Washington's reliability. US lectures on democracy, trade restrictions, and Washington's historically close ties with Pakistan doesn't sit well with New Delhi. Now, India and Pakistan pretty much hate each other. So we're like that friend that's still friends with a guy and a girl who just broke up. India has been deepening its ties with Russia, ignoring US sanctions on Moscow. The Indian government has also expressed that they're nervous about the US unpredictability, and they point out how the US abandoned Afghanistan. But really, everyone's abandoned Afghanistan. Alexander the Great, Russia, the United States. Number 5, France. France is like that moody intellectual friend who constantly questions America's choices. There was this submarine deal that left France fuming, US pressure on Europeans to spend more on defense. In recent years, Paris has given the US some serious side-eye. But the whole submarine thing was the US secretly negotiated a defense pact with Australia and the UK, causing Australia to cancel a massive submarine contract from France. French President Macron was furious, calling it a stab in the back. This one, it's not going to change. They might be giving us the side eye, but it's not going anywhere, this relationship. They may want to pull away from the US, but they won't. Number 4, Panama. Now this is a tricky one. Their situation is kind of like, thanks for the canal, but we've got other options now. For decades, Panama was deeply tied to the US, mainly because Washington built and controlled the Panama Canal until 1999. But times have changed. China is investing heavily in Panama, making the country less dependent on the US. Panamanians remember how the US invaded in 1989 to remove dictator Manuel Noriega. Many saw that as an example of American imperialism. I was in Panama, and I'll tell you what I learned way back then, the 1990s, is the younger people did not like the United States. The older people seem to. Now, those younger people are now the older people, and I don't know if they've changed their ways, but back then there was a difference between the age brackets about how they felt towards the United States. Panama is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, meaning Beijing is now a major economic player in that region. While still friendly, Panama is moving away from Washington and looking towards China as a more reliable partner. And this has brought something new to the equation. The US has talked about taking it back. The worry is if China gets a hold of it, it could be a major problem for the US. I don't even think we have many military bases down there anymore. I knew there was a whole bunch when I was down there. I heard PATCOM, which was a major headquarters for the United States Army, well, military in general, is now like a condo area or something. But yeah, there's chatter the United States wants to go down and, I don't know, maybe invade again. We'll see how that one works out. That one, I think it's got a potential to become really bad, and I think something's going to happen with it because it is vital to the United States. And if one of our adversaries really takes control of it, it could spell trouble for us. Number 3, Russia. Oh boy, where do we start? Between sanctions, NATO expansion, and direct military confrontation in Ukraine, Russia's more than just annoyed. It's actively opposing US influence whenever it can. Putin sees the US as the main obstacle for his ambitions, and he's not shy about it. I'm sure they're still irritated about the whole 1980s Afghanistan thing, and I'm sure the name Charlie Wilson upsets a lot of older Russian diplomats. If you've never learned about Charlie Wilson and the Afghan War, he was a congressman. You should read a book on him or at least watch the movie. So the US has been arming Ukraine, which, as we all know, Russia has been attacking for a couple of years now. We keep giving them weapons, and then we encourage all our friends to give them weapons too. Russia's attitude is like, hey, mind your own business. This is a family matter. The US is putting sanction after sanction on Russia, and their economy is in really bad shape, but Moscow's still standing. The biggest problem the US faces with Russia is no matter what we do, they're always there, and they want to undermine our power wherever possible. Working with China, working with Iran, working with North Korea, working with India, anything they can to get under our skin and disrupt whatever it is we do, that's becoming a problem, a real problem. Number 2, Canada. Polite but frustrated neighbor. Canada and the US have a long history of being best friends, but things have been getting frosty. Canadians, usually mild-mannered, have plenty of reasons to be annoyed. The Trump-era trade war put tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, despite Canada being one of America's closest allies. The Keystone Pipeline cancellation angered Canada's energy sector, costing billions in investments. The US constantly ignores Canada on global issues rather than an equal. Canadians may not hate the US, but they're increasingly seeing Washington as selfish and an unreliable ally. Now, this whole tariff thing has been put on pause, but there's been threats and they were in place for a couple days and then they were put on pause, so we'll see how all that works out. Eventually, I'm sure the US and Canada will work it all out. I mean, I've been watching NHL games and they're booing the national anthem in Canada right now. I've been to Canadian hockey games in the NHL up in Calgary and Vancouver, and they usually sang along with you. I'm sure it'll get worked out though. All right, before we get to number 1, if you have not subscribed to this channel, we'd appreciate it if you did, and give the video a big thumbs up. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, China. Congratulations, Beijing. You got the top spot. If there's one country actively working to dethrone the US as the world superpower, it's China. Trade wars, military tensions in the South China Sea, Taiwan, the growing global influence through economic partnerships, China and the US are locked in a power struggle that's only going to get more intense. Yeah, this one I think has a lot of potential to actually turn into a shooting problem. The whole Taiwan thing, I truly believe, I guess it's my opinion, I think it's got a good chance of blowing up in our faces, and in their faces too, not just us. Right now, China is doing a massive military buildup in the Pacific, so is the US. Things get dangerous when countries start doing that. We've never been really good friends with China, we've been trading partners. They are a communist country, and that pretty much goes against everything the US stands for, or at least used to stand for. I don't think this one's at the level where we should all start buying bomb shelters. Might not be a bad idea. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. A little bit different. We'll be back to our normal stuff on our next video. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.